Turk. I'm the Director of Student Disability Resources and Services here at Texas A&M Commerce. So first, I want to start with basically the purpose and the commitments we have as a department, and that is to create an inclusive environment that's accessible to students with disabilities, and then offer some services we provide below. Anything from academic accommodations to housing accommodations to support services and special programming to meet the needs of our students. So we do have to comply with some legal obligations. As an institution, we are required to provide accommodations under the Americans with Disabilities Act and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. So it is essential that our department is able to support our students with those needs. So this slide kind of illustrates to you the growth that we've had in our department over the years. I've been here since 2011, and in 2011, our numbers have basically had a 52% increase. We've doubled in size of students registered with our department, and this just shows you from 2015 to fall this past year, where at the end of the semester, we were up over 400 students registered with our department. So what does that really look like? Well, this is an illustration of the different types of disabilities we serve. So basically, we have a large number of students with learning disabilities. We have a large number of students with ADD, ADHD, and in just recent years, since 2014, we've seen a 60% increase in students with psychiatric disabilities. These are mainly students with anxiety and depression, and these students require very specific supports, and they have very specific needs, and so we have to work collaboratively with other areas on campus and within our own area to support the needs of these students. Additionally, we currently, in the fall, had 20 students that we serve on the autism spectrum. That doesn't mean that's the total population of students on the spectrum here on this campus, but those are the students that are registered with us that request accommodations. Those students have very specialized needs. Each of them they're not identical to each student. However, oftentimes they require a great deal of support in regards to executive functioning, helping them with social skills, providing accommodations inside and outside the classroom, things like that. So one thing that my department does to ensure students with visual impairments, learning disabilities, ADHD, is we provide an accommodation for note-taking assistance. And one form of that is the use of an in-class note taker. This is someone that's already in the class that takes notes for the student that's in the class that has an accommodation for this. It can be done either confidentially or non-confidentially, depending on what the student with the disability prefers. What we do in order to ensure accountability of these students who take notes is we provide them a stipend. So basically, fall semester we had 77 students we provided note takers for, and so that comes to about $5,000. I actually decreased the amount that we were paying note takers because I wasn't sure if I had enough funding for this year based on student need. And so like in the spring, we have 55 note takers, and so that comes to about $3,500, $3,800. We also, in my department, have a testing center. This testing center is essential to support the testing accommodation needs for our students. As you can see, in the fall, we administered 452 exams. That is a very complicated effort. That means we're administering exams for instructors all across campus with different parameters for each exam. Do they use notes? What type of calculator? Can they use a periodic table? All of those details, along with ensuring that we're providing the appropriate reasonable accommodations that the students are allotted. So this takes every man on deck in my department to administer these and make sure they occur efficiently and correctly. So that's very important to understand. Another service or required reasonable accommodation that my department provides to students with disabilities is for students with hearing impairments. We're required to provide effective means of communication for those students. If a student prefers having an interpreter in class, then that's what we provide for those students with hearing disabilities. If we have an online class or a face-to-face class and a student would like to have CART, which is communication access in real time, so that's basically the captioning that you may see on movies or on the news, and so we're required to provide that. And I'm showing you this breakdown over the years of this expense because this kind of falls into one of the reasons we often have rollover funding in my department is because I always had to be ready for a year like this in regards to interpreters and communication access real time. I can never predict how this will be for each year or semester. So for instance, I did have a student who utilized interpreters in the fall, and I have students right now who are utilizing CART services. That can change drastically. I could have 3 students come in the fall that require sign language interpreters, and I have to have 2 interpreters for anything past 1 hour of class time. So if they interpret for longer than an hour, I have to have 2 to tag team. So not only do we pay the hourly rate, which I have given you an approximation of that on my handout, but I also pay travel time. And as you can imagine, that means we're paying for interpreters to come from Dallas or other areas outside of Commerce to come here and provide those services. So it's very expensive. It's something that makes me very nervous. So I have to make sure that I have adequate funding to cover that if the need arises. So as far as my year-over-year increase, which I believe is very important to you as a committee, basically last year what happened was I requested $332,000 and then $894, and this year $363,000. And you can see I've broken down the differences. And I can explain the difference under salaries, which is $20,190, and then I'm going to explain the differences for operating on the next slide. We had an associate director at one time in my department. I spent last year trying to fill that position and had 2 failed searches. Was unable to get someone that was qualified and be able to pay them what they needed to be paid to acquire them and have them be part of our team. So I had to start thinking, what am I going to do? I've got a growing number of students and a growing need for support services. So what am I going to do to fix this? So I started looking at things and recalculating, and I came up with a plan to reorganize or restructure my department, which meant getting rid of an associate director, but it meant I was able to provide 1 additional professional staff for $20,000 extra. So I basically took, the salary of the associate director, broke it off. So now I actually have me as the director, I have a case manager, I have a coordinator, I have an administrative associate 3, and then I still have a part-time testing facilitator. And this is very important for the support that's needed in our area for our students, especially with the growing number of psychiatric students and the growing number of students on the autism spectrum. So education, outreach, and programming are now a vital piece of my department. We are currently working on developing a pilot program for students on the autism spectrum. This is very important. We're looking at launching this in the fall, where we're going to work with these students. We're going to provide them an opportunity to work, and bi-weekly sessions in the evenings to develop our social skills, our marketable skills, and then we're going to have them work in academic departments for several weeks at the end of the semester. This is a HIPS practice, which is a high-impact practice that is very important in retention, and it's going to be very important in the employment of these students when they exit our institution. It's very challenging for students on the spectrum. They can go to college, they can be effective academically, they can graduate, but getting them employed has been a huge challenge. So outreach and education is also important for our department. We are also currently working on a student organization that we hopefully will launch in the fall. So all of these are very important for the advocacy of our students and for the campus community to understand their needs. These are some of our services that we provide. I talked about exams, so I'm not gonna focus on that. We do collaborate with outside agencies. We do provide a case management approach for our students where we assist our students with time management, social functioning. They come in and meet weekly or bi-weekly with me or the case manager to help them stay on track throughout the semester. Advocacy, we're working on that towards a student organization. We try to do as much outreach as we can now. Before, I didn't have enough staff to do a lot of that. So now it's something we really can focus on and do a better job at. So we're not fully funded. It would inhibit our ability to provide reasonable accommodations to our students, and it would ultimately leave the institution at risk and the retention of our students at risk. Let me let you know that we have, we're doing a great job with retention right now. We have 66 students who've applied for graduation this spring. Of our students, when undergraduate students in the fall, they completed 81% of the attempted hours they were registered for, and our graduate students, who we also serve, completed 83% of their attempted hours for the fall term. Are there questions?
Sure.
Yes,
Can you
sir.
go back to the previous slide?
Sure.
The statement, ultimately, this would leave the institution at risk. Isn't that a no-brainer?
Well, yeah.
Is that a question?
Is that a question or?
It's in violation of federal law.
Yeah, exactly.
I prefer a more descriptive statement rather than just saying institution at risk. We're in violation of federal law if we don't fund.
Yeah, and not many people like it when I throw around that statement. It doesn't come off as.
Michael Eric Dyson was here the other semester and wrote a book, What Truth Sounds Like. And the central theme of the book is we have to speak truth to power, to authority. Second question, I saw you had a 20,190. I had a calculation of 30,190. Am I $10,000 off somewhere?
No, the other 10,000, I'm sorry. Yeah, it was in operations, and let me go back. It was for education, outreach, and programming. It's right here. This
Operation and maintenance?
Education,
Gotcha.
outreach,
Okay.
and programming is $10,000 there. I'm sorry I didn't include that in the following slide.
That's fine.
Yes, but it's under education, outreach, and programming. It's specifically earmarked for the program for students on the spectrum.
And the provost has approved that program already, if it's funded, so. It's gonna take a lot of collaboration with,
Yes.
with the academic affairs.
I'm collaborating with Counseling Center, Career Development, and Academic Affairs.
So, okay, so your new position, your professional staff, what do they serve, what will that person do again?
Well, I have actually, what I did was I took the associate director position and I created a coordinator and a case manager position from that. And so the case manager she is a counselor, so she actually is trained and is taking some of the things off of me, where I have a student that comes in crisis, we've got to de-escalate a situation, we've got to make a referral to the counseling center. She does that, and then she also just does basic case management, referral to resources, coordination with on-campus internal resources, meeting with students, supporting students, and then we all are cross-trained in my department, so we all help with testing, we all help with the front office. We do all of those things.
On a long-term basis, the line item that strikes me as the interpreter part, and you know, at some point, you may look at having to have a staff position that a person can do interpretation.
We had that, and so we did have a staff interpreter when I started, and it ended up not being economically feasible because when we had no students, then we were paying a salary person whose specialization area was interpreting, and so we weren't really able to efficiently utilize that person. I felt like we were, it wasn't economically advantageous. Yes?
Can you go back to the last slide?
Sure. This one?
Yes. Is the GAMP, is that for a graduate assistant?
And that was in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
It was,
So
and we
you-
did not have a graduate student,
Okay.
because it was the part that we took out when we weren't fully funded.
Mm-hmm.
We were not fully funded, we were funded for $125,000 last year. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Rebecca.